Long, long ago, a much-loved emperor lived in a splendid palace surrounded by the most beautiful gardens. The emperor's palace was the most beautiful in the world. It was built entirely of porcelain and very costly. In the garden could be seen the most singular flowers with pretty silver bells tied to them. There also was a noble forest with lofty trees sloping down to the deep blue sea, and the great ships sailed under the shadow of its branches. In one of these trees lived a nightingale who sang so beautifully. This is how Hans Christian Andersen describes the opulent Chinese palaces and gardens in the Western imagination in his work, The Nightingale. English literature and Chinese architecture, two seemingly unconnected things, have come together to create a beautiful Chinese-English story. Today, let's take a journey into history and dig into the mystery of this amazing relationship. As early as the 1460s, the English writer John Mandeville completed The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, based on the experiences of explorers such as Marco Polo. The protagonist of this book describes Metropolis as a small hill within the imperial city on which another palace is built. It is the most beautiful in the world. The Emperor's palace is magnificent, with 24 golden pillars and the red animal skins hanging on all the walls. Between the lines, the grandeur and the luxury of the Tartar kingdom was impressed upon the British mind. In 1588, after defeating the Spanish Invincible Armada, the British Empire, driven by profit, turned its attention to the mysterious ancient China, a land said to be full of gold. In the same year, Robert Park completed the English version of the history of the great and mighty kingdom of China and the situation thereof, and published it in London. This work provided the British with a comprehensive introduction to Chinese society, culture, and history, while at the same time praising Chinese architecture, canals, roads, and bridges. This stimulated the interest of the British in China, and the relationship between the two countries grew closer. In 1625, Purchas His Pilgrimes was published in London, containing over 1,300 essays, of which the abridged history of Christian expeditions to China gives a more comprehensive account of the scale of the Chinese cities visited, the pattern of the imperial cities, the layout of private gardens and urban infrastructure such as roads and bridges, which is based on Matteo Ricci's 28 years of living in China. The tone of the missionaries' descriptions of China was mostly complimentary and overwhelming. This free publicity had an unexpected effect. A wave of Chinese-style fashion soon swept Britain, and soon Europe. Along with the increasing exchanges between China and Europe in the late 17th and first half of the 18th centuries, the British had developed an overall impression of China. China had neat and prosperous cities, well-connected roads and canals, freely laid out gardens and symmetrical groupings of buildings, which laid a foundation for the ensuing discussions and practice of Chinese architecture. In 1685, Sir William Temple, who is credited with pioneering the practice of English landscape garden, completed his essay upon the gardens of Epicurus, and raised Chinese gardens to the level of philosophical beauty for the first time. In the following years, Joseph Edison and Stephen Switzer also published articles admiring Chinese natural garden architecture, arguing that the rocks, caves, and waterfalls in Chinese gardens all were unadorned and natural, which was in contrast to the pretentious and monotonous geometrical patterns of European gardens. In Pope's collected poems, he expresses his admiration for Chinese gardens and his derogatory comment on European gardens with geometrical rules in the following way. Genius and the most artistic people were always most attracted by nature. On the contrary, those with only average insight mostly preferred artistic slenderness and absurdity. And with examining the history of architecture, we also find that the English aristocracy of the time was not only keen to build Chinese gardens, but also to blend Chinese garden styles with other regional styles. For example, the royal outlying house at Bridgetown, the Orange Garden, was generally modeled on a Chinese temple, with a mixture of traditional Chinese green walls, carved angle brace, titled gables, and slender Gothic columns in the details. Then, the wheel of history came to a head in 1797, when the English Romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote Kublai Khan, in which the depiction of Yuan dynasty of China inspired countless Westerners to yearn and long for the mysterious China. The description of flowering gardens, winding streams and rivers, beautiful and chic pavilions and waterfalls, greatly reflected the beauty of Chinese gardens. From the depiction of Chinese architecture in English literature, it is not difficult for us to know that the English of that time were beginning to form a more comprehensive and accurate impression of Chinese architecture. In the mid-18th century, however, as European colonial power in Asia grew and consolidated, the desire of Western capitalism to exploit the economic potential of Asia grew, as well as that the pejorative perception of China dominated the English mind. The European chinoiserie began to go downhill. After the 19th century, China's weakening state power completely removed the impetus for the spread of the Chinese style, which then only appeared occasionally in the West and had already been on the way. The journey of Chinese and English studies in architecture may not be long in comparison to the long history, but we can see from this journey how Chinese cultural connotations have influenced and shaped Western civilization. Literature may not seem relevant to architecture, but it did play a considerable and positive role in spreading the idea of Chinese architectural aesthetics. Literature played a pivotal role in the introduction of Chinese architecture to the West and influenced the art of gardening there. Therefore, we should never overlook the importance of literature in history.